welcome to the extra credits of We Live in Time. I'm Trey.
And I'm Kelsi.
So We Live in Time is now leaving theaters. It just hit streaming recently, I think this week.
Yeah.
We saw this movie for an early screening almost 2 months ago now.
Yeah.
It's been quite a while. Yeah. It's a big holiday movie. It's a big holiday week. So we thought maybe we could talk about a movie that I think many people will be checking out at home.
Yeah, definitely.
I think right now is a good time to do that. And also we just get an excuse to talk about Andrew Garfield.
Yeah.
Who, was one of our favorite actors. But if your algorithms are anything like ours, I'm sure you've seen that Andrew Garfield's press season right now is unlike any other.
Yes.
It's like legendary stuff from
He's doing a great job. He's wearing great sweaters. He has a great pink sweater in his like actor on actor Harris Dickinson interview. Obviously, there is the chicken shop date that we have to talk about.
I think we will. He was pretty amazing in the Criterion Closet, admiring Scorsese and Fincher. And then he went on Elmo to talk to children, giving them a language for how to grieve with the recent passing of his mother. I think that was the reason he went on there.
Yeah.
Probably the reason he did We Live in Time as well.
Yeah.
So he's just been putting himself out there in pretty authentic ways, vulnerable ways, but yes, in spicy ways too, with Amelia Dimoldenberg's chicken shop date. That
unexpected.
was quite a 10 or 11 minutes. So we might have to clear out and talk about that for a few minutes at the end today. And I'm excited to talk about Garfield today, but I'm also excited to talk about Florence Pugh, who I think gives one of my favorite performances of her career.
Me too.
In this movie, which is really exciting. And I think without them, and that'll be an interesting part of our conversation today, without these two great actors, I think this would feel like a pretty conventional, serviceable,
kind of formulaic.
Yes, kind of
it doesn't work without them.
Absolutely. And it's directed by a good filmmaker, but really, it's thanks to this two-hander that this movie transforms into anything really interesting in the current landscape of romantic dramas. Even though it is a odd setup for a romantic drama, with it being like this non-linear time-jumping movie. Okay, so spoilers are ahead. I'd recommend checking this out on streaming or at your local AMC or Regal, wherever it's playing still. Okay, so John Crowley's We Live in Time. I think this movie is one of the more manipulative films of 2024. And that sounds like a criticism. It's not necessarily a critique.
I was going to say, I think you like this more than me.
I think I do. I think I was successfully manipulated is what I'll say. And I was welcome to it.
A part of these movies.
Yeah, I guess it is a part of like the standard conventional romantic drama, romantic comedy subgenre. This is a very well-crafted movie. It had me laughing in the theater. It had us get expectedly sad, and then confused in interesting ways and confused in uninteresting ways as well. So this is like by no means...
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
Yeah, it's by no means a past lives, but this certainly isn't that kind of run-of-the-mill supply chain rom-dram that you're going to find on Netflix right now. Like, this is not an anyone but you kind of romance. It's not like a past lives, but it finds like a comfortable space in between those two kinds of
it's somewhere
movies.
in the middle, right? It's not like so heavy on the tropes that it's just something that you can like throw on and enjoy. And it's not something that subverts the kind of romance genre like a past lives was that last year now?
I think that was last year. Yeah,
that was like one of my favorite episodes that we did, in that I think Past Lives subverts the genre, does something interesting where it's actually about an exploration with like self-identity. This is like more so, We Live in Time is more so like playing with the romantic comedy tropes.
Yes.
Doing some interesting things with them, still adhering to a lot of the formulaic things, but playing with the like different, specific writing of the characters.
Yeah.
But still lives within the kind of like, I saw this movie, I felt like the characters were appreciating life. I'll take that feeling.
Yes.
But I'll kind of leave the movie.
Yeah. I will say this about John Crowley. He did craft a film, and again, it's thanks to the great performances, but he did craft a movie with his great team about normal adults being forced into some mature, relatable, challenging life situations, life dilemmas. So that's why I'm saying it's not quite a streaming run-of-the-mill romance movie. It's probably in that tier of movies like The Vow or The Fault in Our Stars, Me Before You, One Day, Love, Rosie. A lot of time jumping narratives, maybe not quite like this time jumping where you are shooting back and forth every 7 or 8 minutes, it feels like, every new sequence. But yeah, it has that kind of will they make this work tension, like Harry Met Sally tension. But there is this existential illness also added into the screenplay that feels a little bit like Fault in Our Stars. So I was thinking about a lot of movies while watching this, but I will give credit to John Crowley because it is just nice to see a movie that is ultimately about human beings making relatable decisions. Yeah. Even if I don't necessarily believe in some of the character decisions in this movie because of some underbaked character stuff.
Agreed. Yeah. It's not like, I feel like there are some, you know, of the like streamer, like recycled rom-com stories that it really just relies on tropes of like they make up tensions basically, right? And those are kind of like the bad ones, some of the unwatchable ones, for me at least. But yeah, I think like We Live in Time does find a good like spot in the like about time rom-coms that I love, like which doing something interesting,
best case scenario,
or like a Love, Rosie even, right? Where you feel like that there is actual tension there, but it is undercut, I think, by the specific, I guess, like route they decide to go with the time jumps. Like that is really what I think undercuts this movie.
Which I want to get to in just a second, but let's set up the plot a little bit better. We're going to get deeper into spoiler territory here. So We Live in Time follows Tobias, played by Andrew Garfield, who is a Weetabix representative, I believe. And
I didn't know what Weetabix were.
I had to Google it, and apparently it is like a shredded wheat cereal.
Okay.
So I'm sure our British
mini
listeners
wheats?
know. What?
Like a
mini
frosted
wheats?
mini
Yes,
wheats?
like a frosted mini wheat situation, which is a top 5 cereal.
A solid cereal.
So shout out that job. So Garfield is presented to us as, well, Andrew Garfield, so a very attractive, still in Spider-Man shape guy.
Looking great.
Who is recently divorced and possibly a bit depressed.
Kind of aimless,
little aimless, whose life changes after being hit by a car. And this is one of the funniest sequences
really, like,
of the movie.
Sweet moment. Not after, because that is too, but like when he's kind of just like walking.
Yes. With his snacks. We find out that he was, in this car, or getting hit by a car driven by Almet, which I believe is the character name, played by Florence Pugh.
Right.
Who you don't know if is the person he just got a divorce with. You're kind of confused. Because of how the movie starts, I think, with them in an office and finding out about her illness. Or something like that.
Yeah, because we start, almost like with the end of the movie.
Right.
Or like what the driving tension, it's not necessarily the end, but what we're like working towards in terms of the tension towards the end of the movie with her illness and the choice that she's going to make.
To set up the stakes, but it also kind of counters the tension of the movie because you kind of know what's going to happen the entire film. Yeah.
I think that this moment, though, their meet cute was great. Yeah. Like, I think it was a unique, fun way, especially when they just have great chemistry, like acting in that hospital room where she is having to like break to him, I'm the person that hit you, and he has his cervical,
tough
spine collar on.
Yes.
But he's like so immediately taken by her. And of course, we're just like in the rom-com. We're in this movie and we believe it. We're like, yes, I believe that he's like immediately, it's kind of like that love at first sight, but it doesn't feel overly written or cheesy. It's because it's
one of our great emotional actors, Andrew Garfield, expressing a lot in a moment where he's got the makeup team did a great job. He was just clearly, trucked by a car. So he's feeling it. But he's doing a fantastic job.
Seem like that damaged. Like, it felt like it should have been maybe more, but.
So we learned a little bit more about Pugh's character. She is a former figure skater turned fusion chef, I guess. And these two characters begin a romance after this meet cute, as you put it.
A big moment for chefs.
Huge moment for chefs right now with the bear, boiling point, the menu. Yeah. There's a lot of some not nice representations of chefs.
Sure.
Some really like humanizing ones. But this romance is a mostly off-screen romance, in my opinion, which is a criticism I think I have of this movie and the narrative.
Yeah, I was like, where is the walking scene? Like, where is them like
we get some, but not enough.
Yeah, we get mostly their fights, or like, and the fights feel like interesting in that they're making a decision together, or someone is clear about like boundaries that someone overstepped. But there's not enough of the moments of that kind of meet cute in the hospital.
Yes.
For me, at least.
Well, I think there are a lot of moments. It's not, I think it's like 100-ish minute movie, but it doesn't feel that it's rushed. It just feels that because it's a non-linear narrative and we don't get that linear progression of their romance, you're kind of shot into the future or shot through the past in a pretty chaotic way. So we can hit some of the key sequences in a second and then get to the end of this movie, which does have me tearing up, which is Andrew Garfield, like, who now learned how to cook eggs from his deceased wife, teaching their daughter how to cook eggs. Like, when we get to that moment, there is a payoff for me personally.
Yeah, it's very sweet.
But let's talk about what you're talking about, which is that the editing of this movie and the time jumping romance of all the narrative, like, did that ultimately work for you, or was it ultimately a distraction from the story?
Yeah, I think it was a distraction for me. It felt a little bit messy. Also because we are jumping from, we start with a really like mature conversation of Florence Pugh saying, I don't know if I want to go through chemo. I might just want to like live my life to the fullest in the time that I have left. And you can obviously see, Andrew Garfield, he is like struggling with this decision, but wants to respect her decision about like her life and how she wants to live her final months, weeks, whatever like she has left.
Right.
And so to start with that really mature conversation in the parking garage, and then go to these other moments in their relationship, or the kind of like building where he sees her in like a party and recognizes, after he like went to the restaurant and everything. And that was cute. Like him waiting at the restaurant for her to get off her shift. And then he ultimately like goes to this party with her and sees her across the room.
That stuff does happen pretty quick though, because they go from that date to having sex later that night, I believe. And then their relationship begins from there.
Right. But there's also a moment where he like recognizes that he really loves her and wants a future with her. And then he tells her in the kitchen, like, hey, I want to know if you want to have children. Because if not, then like maybe I shouldn't pursue this because I'm already kind of in love with you.
Yeah.
And those moments felt like strangely out of character for the Andrew Garfield character.
Yes.
And so because we started with a really mature conversation and then went and bounced around to some really cute meet cute kind of and building romance, to then conversations that felt like they were
serious life decisions that they didn't really know each other super well to have those.
Kind of like it was like Andrew Garfield's character in that moment. It was supposed to be a cute thing, you know what I mean? But it actually felt kind of like manipulative in a way, of him saying like, you need to make this decision now. It just felt so strange and not like how it felt who he was at the beginning of the movie that I met.
Right. Well, that's the criticism I have of Florence Pugh's character, which is fascinating. Okay. So I think we're on the same page there with the...
Oh, yeah. I felt that way too, with like her some of her choices didn't like line up with the character we met.
So I think the experimental conceit of the editing ultimately does a disservice to the character development for both of these characters. With Tobias, we do know that early on, like what you're saying, he has this desire to want to start a family, which then clashes with Pugh's character's goals. And I think the acting conveys this tension really well. But again, to add on to what you're saying, the writing is pretty tough because it doesn't give Garfield much interiority. So therefore, he just comes off as a little bit like overbearing or overwhelming. And there's things that are hinted at with this character, like that he was raised by a single father. We don't really I don't think we find out what happened to his mother.
Yeah, I don't think so.
So that's a little bit confusing, and maybe it was hinted at, I'm not sure. But he did seem to really respect his father. He was living with him, I think, after the divorce. I think they mentioned that or showed that at one point. So he does have this built-in, I want to be a present parent into his character. And I guess you could say the movie is progressive in as far as like flipping the gender expectations in interesting ways.
That we normally see in in this genre for sure.
Right, where this man character wants to like come in and actually be a parent right away. But I think the irony here is that they flip the gender expectations, but women have been historically written in stereotypical ways of wanting to be a parent, but there isn't a lot of agency or identity or qualities outside of just wanting to be a parent.
Right,
and
for their character, it's like that one thing. Yeah.
Right, and so he's then stuck with those tropes in an interesting way that feels unexamined. And I think the editing is trying to take you in and out of that because it almost knows that, and so it doesn't want you to think too much about that. And then with Pugh's character, we find out more about her, right? She's more layered, I think. We find out that she previously had a girlfriend or wife or partner, and that she maybe considered having children before, but ultimately doesn't want them until she meets Tobias.
Yeah, I feel like we do get more background of Florence Pugh's character for sure.
Right. And I think her character is ultimately the main character, like you were saying, and her performance is excellent. Like I said, it's one of her career best performances, in my opinion. I think she deserves the extra credit of this film.
I think she carries this movie,
Yes. I think emotionally, Andrew Garfield's character carries this. I think through the tension and the narrative, and the movie actually needing to exist, I think Pugh's performance is the reason why you want to go and see this.
Right. And then Andrew Garfield's kind of like reactions.
Right. You really rely on his eyes and his expressions and those reaction shots. But yeah, she is a fascinating character. You see she has boxes all around her house of like these multiple lives that she's lived, which is an interesting choice. And then I think toward the end of the movie, maybe toward the middle of the film, we find out that she's been diagnosed with ovarian cancer and she has one of her ovaries removed while choosing to keep the other. And I think the movie then provokes the audience with a big, mature adult question, which is, do you risk the return of cancer to have biological children?
Right.
Which Pugh's character, up until this point in the writing of this character and the agency that this character has, makes a choice to keep one of her ovaries that I think is genuinely surprising in the movie. It's not that I'm judgmental of the character whatsoever for making that choice, and that is a challenging choice to make. But everything we know about this character thus far, that was a big moment for me.
Yeah.
Where I didn't really think that the character would do something like that.
Yeah. Well, it felt kind of strange within that specific character, like in terms of what we had learned about Pugh's character at that point. So yeah, I agree. Like I was taken aback because it felt like while I believed in their relationship, and I ultimately really liked the movie, and a lot of things worked for me, especially just I think with their chemistry when they're in a room together. But I think while it's an interesting like adult conversation, like you're saying, that people will ultimately be like, I respect your decision no matter what on when watching it as the audience.
Yeah, it's a relatable dilemma.
They're feeling a lot of like empathy for this this partnership who's like making a decision about their future. It did feel like strangely made for Florence Pugh's character, also just because it seemed like later on Andrew Garfield's character was kind of like a device to also have her lean into like more traditional ways of,
I thought so too,
of like expressing love or like having a wedding. That's why it also felt strange, because it felt like as we were further progressing into the story, it was like, oh, well, I guess I'll, she was talking about how maybe she didn't want kids, but I'll have kids with you. I didn't know if I wanted a wedding specifically, like a traditional wedding, but I'll have one with you. It felt kind of strange in that sense. Felt
forced. Yeah. And I don't think
like outside of her characters. Yeah.
Right. And so I think ultimately those were all odd choices for me, though they did plant some seeds, much like the Garfield thing with his dad, in this case with Pugh's character and her father, about her dad dying when she was young, I believe.
Yeah.
And ultimately, even though you could look at that and read into that as a reason for her wanting to live multiple lives in the time she has remaining with her family, I still don't think there's much of a philosophy with these characters. They don't seem totally developed as people.
Yeah.
And even Pugh's character, as interesting as she is relative to Garfield's character, her character even feels like a device to create tension, much like the editing.
Yeah.
I think the point of this conversation was that I wanted to ask you if the editing worked. You said it didn't work for you.
Yeah. I'm assuming now that we're talking about it didn't work for you either.
In the moment, I was invested.
Okay.
Right until I had to walk out and start thinking about it after we left our chicken fingers and fries and like having a beer, and I was like, didn't really work for me. In fact, like once you actually examine the movie, I think there are a ton of flaws that pop up.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. So yeah, I think the non-linear emphasis was, unfortunately sacrificing a lot of the development that we're talking about.
Yeah. So also because it felt like, specifically in the moment where we had that kind of Jerry Maguire scene where Andrew Garfield like wants to apologize and goes back into the apartment, and there's a baby shower he's kind of disrupting. It felt less sweet that he was doing that, or like a grand romantic gesture, like you had me at hello, Jerry Maguire. But
which is impossible to recreate. But if you're going to try it,
baby shower, like get out of here.
It is a very odd thing to do. Yeah, it was very strange. It was Andrew Garfield though, so I kept going, well, it's Andrew Garfield. You know what I mean? Like he's going to get away with a lot of these weird, strange things. As the movie progresses, we see Almut's journey through her illness as it kind of intertwines with her training for a cooking competition, which I haven't talked about too much. And at one point toward the second half of the film, we get probably the best sequence of the movie, I think, which is the birth scene at the gas station.
I think maybe the best scene in the movie.
I think so. Yeah, I would go as far to say that's true. I think I actually heard that the director thought of this movie around this, the origins of this film was this idea of this kind of random chaotic moment that represented life and the fleeting nature of life and the beauty and the chaos of it. And then he built the movie around this one sequence.
Yeah.
Which I do believe. And you can tell, like, even there aren't a lot of supporting characters in this film that have a lot to do. But the two people who work at the gas station.
Yeah, they're great.
Played by Nikhil Parmar and Carrie Godleman. They deserve extra credit. They are excellent. I love that they're kind of like deep breath and sigh at the end of all of it. And they were like, I guess back to work. But that was such a crazy day for them. So they helped deliver the baby. It's one of the most dramatically satisfying sequences of the year for me.
Yeah.
It's not exactly great. Timothy Chalamet riding the worm in Dune 2, but it is in that tier of like, I had a really great time in the theater watching this chaotic 15 minutes.
Also, I think, the movie does a great job of something that this genre does well, of like these kind of very slow build up of going to the doctor. Like she's not, actually ready to give birth, go home. You know what I mean? That kind of waiting sequence. The funny thing of like the cars being parked too closely in the parallel park.
Yeah, that always gets me.
For it.
Yeah.
Being stuck in traffic. Like that kind of like small, those pieces of like obstacles, right? And then this like funny moment. It did a great job, I think, building to it.
So after we get that kind of the randomness of life kind of injected into this one sequence, being really the thesis of the movie, soon after we meet Ella, who's their child. They enter the story. They become a symbol of hope in the movie, especially for Pugh's character. And I could see some people bumping on this child and like what she symbolizes in the narrative, even though I don't really think that there is a strong political message being made about Almut's choice to have this child and risking her life for a biological child.
Yeah.
I don't think there's political messaging going on across that, though I would totally understand if somebody read the movie in that way.
I think we were also like,
we did bump on it. Like, and I still think I do bump on it ultimately, like what we were saying, but less because of what that choice represents and more so because I don't know the character well enough to think that they would make that decision.
Right.
Which is what we were saying at the top.
Again, it's like less judging the choice or like, obviously like she can make whatever choice she wants, but it just felt like strange within this specific narrative with this specific character.
Right. And so you still are kind of riding on this motivation that because she didn't have much time with her own father, Pugh's character, who passed when she was young, that she would choose to live these kind of multiple lives in the 6 or so months that she has to live. And that's kind of her reasoning for this. But yeah, I think that the narrative conceit is like kind of not necessary. And then we get the final sequence of the movie where Alma is giving it her all to cooking challenge. I was thinking of that one Disney movie, Eddie.
Oh my God, yeah.
What is that movie?
I think you're right. It's like
Eddie's Bake Off
or something.
The purple goo?
Yeah.
You guys know what I'm talking about. I don't know why I thought about that while we were watching this, but
Shout out millennial Gen Z people who...
Shout out. And then she has her final skate with her family, cutting to an epilogue of Garfield showing their daughter how to cook eggs, and then me tearing up because I was successfully manipulated, like I said at the top, which I'm fine to admit. So let's talk about the performances because these actors are really my extra credit.
Yeah.
I don't think, even talking about it now, I'm kind of realizing mid-conversation, like, I don't know if this movie would get made without these two actors. And if it did, it would get sent straight to a streamer. Like,
it would
need Pugh and Garfield to carry this film.
Yeah, it would be like a okay movie, I think, even with other actors, but it really makes it feel like something else. It makes it feel elevated with their performances just because they're so good.
Yeah, they're really the heart of the movie and they're kind of the reason you should go see it. So again, I recommend people, if you haven't seen this and you've stayed this far, see the movie because of them. So I think Garfield and Pugh deserve extra credit because they transform this kind of like stakeless, what potentially could be like a stakeless narrative into something that's pretty impactful. Not for everyone, because this movie has been getting kind of mixed reviews, but I think for me at least. So even though I think this is Florence Pugh's movie and one of her best performances, let's start by talking about Andrew Garfield.
Okay.
Who is one of our favorite actors.
Yes.
Robert Pattinson is my favorite actor, and Christian Bale's like in that one tier, but I think the B tier is like Garfield, like Daniel Kaluuya, Stephen Yeun, Kristen Stewart, Andrew Garfield, Jennifer Lawrence, like those actors are in that tier. And I think Garfield stands out in that specific tier as being an actor of his generation that, and I would say maybe of any generation working right now.
I think you should also say, because I don't think they're B actors, but they're just like, there's in
my top two tiers of actors. Yeah. It's like my Hall of Famers, and then
my like solid like I'm seated for like their performances.
That's a good way to put it. I will go to the movie theater to see any movie they do, versus the top tier, which is I'm buying all the Blu-rays of like all the films you're in. And what I was going to say is I think Andrew Garfield has maybe the greatest emotional range of any actor of his generation, but I'd put him right up there with like a DiCaprio, right? Of somebody who can really express himself in a very versatile way.
Yeah. I mean, especially like in his Criterion Closet, which everyone should go watch.
Yeah.
He was like, I mean, he's great at doing this like humble thing. And I think he is like he seems like a nice guy. You never know with like anyone.
Know with the personas, who knows? But he presents himself that way.
Yeah. Someone who's like self-aware and thoughtful. Mm-hmm. And as he's going through all these movies, he's like, it is so wild that I worked with like Scorsese, and it's so wild that I worked with all these directors.
I know.
And like, I think people forget about something like Silence.
Yeah.
Right.
That they really do. Yeah.
Wild range of a performance and what felt like an epic, right?
It is one. Yeah. It's one of Scorsese's like religious epics. It's been like reclaimed since its release. I think it just got recently a Blu-ray release with Last Temptation of Christ and another film as well.
I always forget Adam Driver's in that movie too.
Yeah, he's excellent in that too. I mean, Andrew Garfield, The Social Network is one of my favorite movies of the 21st century.
Oh my God.
It's an incredible performance. Silence. I mean, this is Spider-Man, who we're talking about too. Hacksaw Ridge, Tick, Tick, Boom. Luca Guadagnino's movie next year with Julia Roberts and Io Debris.
So excited,
Pumped for that. So this is a major performer. Again, one of our favorite actors.
An all-time crier.
All-time crier, conveys so much with his eyes. That's really his special skill. Like Lupita Nyong'o as well. He's in that tier of actors who play with their eyes like that. There's a moment where Garfield catches Zendaya in Spider-Man No Way Home.
Yeah.
And it makes you think about how the character is thinking about Emma Stone's character without spoiling anything. I know it's a 10-year-old movie, but still. And you could see him grieving live on screen, especially if you're like really plugged in as like young millennial, late Gen Z to like their relationship off screen too. You're like really invested in that moment. And what his eyes are doing in that scene are really powerful. And he's bringing that level of energy and acting to We Live in Time.
Yeah.
Because I think he had a personal reason for making this movie too. So that might be why. So I thought he nailed this role in this film. But what I really want to discuss and why I'm talking about him, even though he's not technically my extra credit, it really is Pugh.
Yeah.
Amelia Dimoldenberg.
Okay. Yeah.
On the chicken shop date. Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it.
I mean, kind of a legendary 10 minutes. Was that chicken shop date better than this movie?
Maybe.
Do you know what I mean? Like, that's a crazy thing to say. Like, was that short film? Because I'm going to call it that. We should be allowed to log in on Letterboxd. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was that good.
And I know felt like I was intruding in a conversation.
Yeah.
Which, like, either, of course, means he's an amazing actor.
Which he is.
And he's just, like, really understanding what the chicken shop date is.
The tone of it, yeah.
Yeah, but it did feel like, you know, obviously, like, we're too plugged in this moment because, like, we love Chicken Shop Date. We love Amelia.
It's up there with Hot Ones. It's like some of the go-tos when
and
you're watching interviews. And, of
course, there are a lot of people who really get it and come, like, to play and will do, like, fun things with the kind of sarcasm, like, that they're throwing around. But this felt like Andrew Garfield did something different than anyone has done on Chicken Shop Date, which is just to, like, make it actually, like, a serious date. In a rom-com.
Right.
And it felt like, you know, the whole internet went wild for that week of like, are they going to date? This should happen. Because I think what made it like kind of, I was like, oh wait, maybe this is real, which like normally we don't even do this. Like we don't care about celebrities, but I care about Amelia. So
I strangely do care about her as well.
Yeah.
Don't know her.
She feels like a normal person. But
yeah.
Andrew Garfield, like it was revealed that he gave her his number at one point at like a party, right?
Yes.
And that felt like off script.
Yes. It did feel off book.
Yeah, I was like, wait
I know.
a second.
That's the thing. It does feel like we're intruding for 11 minutes. And that's why I'm calling it like a short film, because it feels so well realized. I'm just going to assume it's acting and that Andrew Garfield's not actually in love with Amelia Dimoldenberg, but he does have a very open heart, let's say, based on like interviews I've watched with him. So I can imagine him like falling for this kind of serendipitous moment.
Well, they have also like, if you follow Amelia's like red carpet stuff, like they've had like funny moments on the red carpet where he's like, was it him where he was like, I don't want to see anyone but you? And she was like, whoa.
Yes. They've had a lot of like red carpet moments that I've gotten iconic. But she usually interviews, I think, like musicians, a lot of rappers. I remember the Jack Harlow one like went big, and she had like a flirtatious energy with him on red carpets. And she's had that energy with like a lot of people.
Yeah,
she plays into that absurdity and irony really well.
Yeah.
But this one did feel different.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I thought it was amazing. And this is just my, pitch to Letterboxd. Let us log that stuff.
Yeah.
Like everybody would join, more people would join the app. By the way, follow us on Letterboxd in the description. So as for Florence Pugh, I think she deserves the most credit for this movie's success. As we were saying, I was really surprised by her in this. I went to this movie as not somebody who didn't think Pugh was like a star actor, but as somebody who was like sort of in, sort of out on her performances in the past. I think obviously Midsommar is like a legendary horror movie over the past decade. Regardless of what you think about it, it's like in the cultural zeitgeist. Is one of the great horror films by one of the great horror directors of the last decade, Ari Aster. And she is excellent in that movie, and she has a really challenging job, and she nails that. I think what she was up to in Little Woman just threw me off so much.
Me too. Yeah.
Maybe forever. I'll always remember that performance.
I remember her like playing
Amy, right?
Like a child, and then having a time jump. It just felt so incredibly strange.
Yeah, and it's a writing choice more than anything else. Like either not recasting that or maybe just doing it a little bit differently. It was just such a strange performance, but it was more of a movie issue. So that's my fault. I got to get over that.
Which we'll definitely we doing Little Woman?
We can announce that now.
Okay.
Yeah, we're covering Little Woman, both Little Womans, really. On Christmas Day, probably on the Patreon. So that's exciting.
I'm excited to talk about that. But that will definitely be one
we
of
have the hot take that,
like, why was that choice made? Yeah,
why was that choice made? And also the '94 Little Woman with Winona Ryder and Christian Bale.
I guess it's a hot take.
Better. We'll have the conversation. So yeah, I mean, I've just been kind of like in and out on her performances, but I thought in this movie, We Live in Time, Florence Pugh really impressively balances a pretty like traditional, sometimes tropey modern woman role of I can be a mom and I can also work too.
Yeah.
Sometimes something that feels like it's been written by men to create this like pseudo progressive, I guess stereotype.
Yeah.
And Pugh actually adds in authenticity and vulnerability to the character's ambitions and like what she wants to do that feels more contemporary. Like there's an agency in her work in this movie that is really hard to get across when it's not on the screenplay, which I don't think it is on the paper. And I think that because of that, I want to give credit to her because she kind of breaks through an underbaked character.
Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, there are like moments that are written in where she comes home from practicing for this like chef cooking Olympics, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Andrew Garfield, they have to like cancel the wedding. But Andrew Garfield says like, why are you doing this? Like you're keeping this as a secret from me.
Yeah.
But also it's taking away your time from us and probably hurting your health. And this last like how much time you have left. And that specific scene where she says like, I want to be more than just like a mom. I want to be more than just, like I don't know. I want to like do something with the time I have left. I don't just want to like, so that
was a great scene.
Yeah. Like it was written in, but she brings more to it. But I've also heard, interestingly, like I was looking at reviews of this movie, and I'm always fascinated when people have a really strong reaction. to the character specifically. Like people were saying that she felt like a selfish character for doing those things. And I thought that was such a strange reaction.
It's a loaded word.
Yeah. I was like, that is literally what the trope is trying to address. Like it's trying to address the stereotype of what you're talking about before with like how women have been written in these roles.
Yeah.
So I felt like her actually, the writing choice of her deciding to do what she wanted, I guess, like, was interesting in this genre. And I felt like Pugh delivered in even like small scenes where I felt that were strange, like her having to talk about like ice skating, how it was special to her. Those kind of things where Andrew Garfield was like, why didn't you tell me about ice skating? Like those felt like very
after the family dinner.
Yeah, like very, again, they would not be the same scenes with other actors, and they really deliver in her bringing this like kind of, this is why I'm like maybe keeping this in, because I'm not ready to unpack what comes with it. That felt like realized from her performance. And I think that's, I feel the same way. Like we have been in and out on Pugh, and I don't think it's because of her. Like, I don't think it's because of her performance for me. I think it's because she's casted a lot in these roles like a Midsummer, where she needs to like portray that she is dealing with an inner turmoil, kind of being quiet, but expressing maybe like this anxiety.
Don't worry, darling, too.
Yeah.
Which is good. A good performance.
Yeah. And she does a great job, but that's also like a really tough thing. And it's not something that I love from characters in general. If it goes on too long, I guess, or it feels forced. And so I feel like she's put in those situations a lot where in this specific situation, like she does a great job, her and Andrew Garfield, like do a great job of showing when they're thinking about something, like expressing a decision even before they maybe like say it out loud.
Yeah.
They're really great at that. And so that's why that tension exists in a successful way in this movie. And that's why you're right. Like she brings a lot to this role in terms of kind of like, again, like subverting our expectations around like women in this genre, and her being the main character here and like wanting and focusing on like the decisions that she like wants to make.
Yeah, I think this movie proves that she was really underused in Dune. So I'm excited for like Dune Part 3 for her to get more to do. I think it proves that she was not just underused in Oppenheimer, but like negatively used, like not even knowing how to use her at all. And so there's certainly like a lot for her to do in future films that allow her that in the screenplay. Like I think she has complexities and kind of a spectrum of emotion she can get across. But you're right. If it's not on the page, it's really tough for her to break past that. This is one of those rare moments in her career. I think she actually does get past that from the page, not really giving her a lot, even though there are moments. It just hit me like what exactly is not working in this film. Maybe we can end the conversation here. We just talked about Notting Hill on Patreon, which is like an all-time rom-com, right? It's got problems, but the problems are inherent to the genre, and the genre is like well aware of them. And if you're into that meta commentary with Julia Roberts,
that movie is aware of them.
That movie, and Julia Roberts and Hugh Grant and what they're up to like unpack that, especially as like a late 90s movie, it's amazing. One thing we talked about in that film is that the secret sauce to Notting Hill is that they have a great ensemble cast.
Yeah.
There's great friends.
Yeah.
A great roommate, Risa Fons, what Spike is up to in that film.
He's great.
Wow. Yeah. There's not a lot of memorable characters. We get a coworker played by, I think it's the actor's Lee Braithwaite, I believe, who plays the coworker Jade. And she's she works in the kitchen with
Florence Pugh. Yeah.
And she's good, but she's not really given a lot to do outside of being that kind of like audience surrogate, wondering exactly what's going on with Florence Pugh's character, even though we're kind of like already on the same page because of the way the editing works in the film. But yeah, we have the family scene in this movie. We meet some of Florence Pugh's character's friends, but there's not an ensemble that you want to come back to. Like it doesn't have that Richard Curtis, group of friends like in About Time or family members that you think are really funny or play the audience surrogate in ways to give you levity. And this movie really needs that. So it puts a lot on the shoulders of Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh to not only be the leads as this two-hander in the movie, but also to give us the comedy that we would get.
You're right. It does feel a little overly serious, right? Like, in a lot of moments, because we're constantly in different moments of their lives and in major decisions that they're making that feel maybe relatable, especially like around like health or how they're going to progress or, in their relationship. But ultimately, you're right. Like, I think it almost needs, it's like not necessarily a romantic comedy if we take out the like gas station scene.
Right. No, yeah, absolutely. Like if you're missing that, then you're not going to get a lot of the humor from this film. Maybe the car incident, but
yeah, which is why I'm so excited to do About Time one day on Patreon.
Probably for New Year's. I could see us doing that.
It is, yeah, I guess like a New Year's movie.
Okay, I think that's it for We Live in Time. So that was the extra credits of We Live in Time. Kelsey, you want to add anything else, extra credits, or just the performances?
Normally we try to, do different extra credits, but I think with this one, it is just the performances. Like, they make this movie, and I would definitely like check it out. It's a great, I think it's on streaming right now, right?
Yes, yeah, you can rent it.
Yeah, so it's a great like at-home movie over the holidays.
Yeah, great date night movie, or just like, get some like hot cocoa,
yeah,
some popcorn.
Yeah.
Check out this movie.
Yeah.
All right, guys.